So if something goes down with the radio system, you don't have a secondary means of alerting your firemen. And that's why these whistles are sometimes employed in these surrounding towns that have a reliable volunteer fire department.
Join us as we dive into the wild world of government auctions and take you behind the scenes to uncover the cool and unique ways bidders from across America are utilizing the items they've won on Municipid. Like an ambulance repurposed into a work truck, to a city bus converted into an RV, and so much more. Welcome to the Municipid Podcast.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing today?
Very well.
Great. Thank you so much for hopping on. So can you start us off by introducing yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Certainly. My name is Richard Twomey, and I am a structural fire protection engineer, degree from the University of Maryland. And I've been involved in the fire service about 40 years as both volunteer and for a metropolitan fire department. I do a lot of work with surplus property and municipal vehicles in my spare time, and I've been a Municipid member for about 2 years now.
Wonderful. Wow. So can you tell us a bit more about what a day in the life is of a fire structural engineer?
Fire protection engineers are degreed engineers, just as you have a mechanical, electrical, civil, environmental engineering. It's a specialization that's offered by the University of Maryland, one other university in the country that offers this degree. I graduated from the program approximately 40 years ago and have worked in the field ever since college completed. Fire protection engineers deal with life safety in buildings and in areas where our expertise are needed for life safety, fire protection measures, fire alarm systems, automatic sprinkler systems, and structural fire protection, both active and passive. And it's a field that emerged in the 1950s and is still producing graduates today.
Incredible. Can you tell us about one of your favorite auction wins on Municipid?
Oh, certainly. I've had approximately 15 auction bids on Municipid. One of the ones was for a 1983 federal signal fire siren. It's primarily used in the Northwest for tornado warning, but it was also employed for volunteer fire departments to summon their people for alarms. And this one I had purchased was out in central Pennsylvania, about an hour west of State College. And it was an older whistle that had fallen off of a tower. And the municipality put it up for bid because they were not going to restructure the steel to put it back up where it needed to go. So they just ended the life of the siren. At the time, I had a friend in an adjoining volunteer fire company who had asked me if I could assist them with fixing their whistle, which was down. And I had expertise in doing this from the 1980s. And I'm one of the few people that still dabbles in these things. So I went over and took a look at it, and I said, well, we're going to have to set it up to have the motor rebuilt. But in the meantime, I have one that I think I can get down here that I just won on a public auction, and we'll put it in service temporarily till your other one is repaired. So we drove out to Western Pennsylvania, picked up the siren from this municipality and drove it all the way back to New Jersey for a 4-hour trip and offloaded it and began the restoration work, which consisted of sanding and priming and painting at 3 coats and getting it ready to go to put it back in service. So we completed the work at the end of the last summer and put it back up with the assistance of another fire department that had a tower ladder truck. And we hooked up the electrical connections, tested it, and it works. It's they're back to what they were before.
Wow. So how did you learn to restore these sirens?
Well, I've always had a hobby of restoring older equipment. A lot of times in the fire service, equipment gets beat up and broken and is in need of being restored and repaired and repainted. So as time went on and I was growing up in my teens, I learned how to do a lot of restoration work in terms of sanding and stripping and priming and painting and how to use a spray paint gun, et cetera, et cetera. So I used these talents over the years to restore a lot of things that I've come across, historical items for the fire service, and I've worked on those things ever since.
For people brand new to restoring sirens, how would you recommend they learn how to do it and get started?
Well, there's kind of a cult following of these things on YouTube and on eBay, et cetera. People that are out there to look for these things that have worked on them in the past or have restored them in the past. And there's a lot of good videos on YouTube regarding restorations that people did and how they went about it and what they employed these whistles for. A lot of them just keep them as a yard ornament. I've only purchased them in the past and restored them to put them back in service for fire departments that might need them.
And which fire department did the siren that you purchased, one from Municipid and restored, go back into service for?
It went back in service, I believe, at the end of August, and it was for the borough of Jamesburg, which is a small municipality in central New Jersey, about 40 minutes south of New York.
How did you find out that Jamesburg needed a new siren?
Well, the chief of the fire department had called me and asked me if I could come take a look at their existing siren that had been up since prior to World War II. And this town had what was called a fire alarm box system, where if you needed to turn an alarm in, you went to a street corner and pulled the box, and it would blow the siren and tap out the alarm for the firemen to respond. This goes back to the 1930s. And the whistle had a motor in it. And the motor, over time, the windings go bad, they get old. And in this case, some birds had taken up nesting in the housing of the whistle and basically decimated the interior workings of it. So after we sent it out for rehabilitation, we learned from the motor shop that it was going to be cost prohibitive to try to put it back in service. It was going to cost thousands of dollars. So this savings of being able to get this motor and this new whistle and put it up in place saved probably about $10,000 in work and procurement and then execution of putting it into service.
Wow. And is it so costly because there's certain parts that you can't get anymore?
Well, that's exactly it. These are no longer manufactured. This model is no longer manufactured. There's newer models out there, but they really, I think, underperform for what we used back years ago. And this one was really a solid, test-proven, really used all over the country kind of whistle. And we were able to get it rehabbed and put it back in service. And the cost of the siren was minimal. And I just decided, with the effort and the friendships I've had through the years with this fire department, that I would just donate it to them, which is what I did. So the cost of the siren rehab and then the electrical work was all performed by me, and I just wrote it off as a donation to them because they're good people.
Wonderful. That's very kind of you. And has this been the only fire department that you've restored and donated a siren to, or?
I've had luck with other municipalities getting rid of these whistles for one reason or another, and I've restored 2 or 3 others for some additional towns in the area and put those up in place of ones that have burned out that are no longer usable. Sometimes just the cost of rebuilding the motors is prohibitive, and you just don't want to spend that kind of money when there's other things that you're dealing with in a fire department to come in compliance with state regulations and with trying to keep your apparatus up to snuff and keeping everything on moving so that you're able to respond. So the alerting whistles really are a secondary form of alerting the fire department. Normally, it's done over radio pagers or connections to iPhones or to smartphones rather, and those connections are all done by radio waves. So if something goes down with the radio system, you don't have a secondary means of alerting your firemen. And that's why these whistles are sometimes employed in these surrounding towns that have a reliable volunteer fire department. They're utilized as a secondary backup means to alert the firemen. And that's what this whistle does. It's heard all around town, and it alerts people both day and night.
Can you tell us more about the history of Jamesburg and back in the day, there was no 911 or phones as we know them today, right? So can you explain more about that history and how that worked?
The outdoor sirens go back to the 1920s. They were made primarily just for alerting firemen in large areas. But as time went on with the advent of World War II and the Cold War and so forth, these really came to fore in the 1950s with civil defense. And where these fire departments would use them for alerting their members, they were also certain codes in timing of the siren rising and falling that meant either an attack or take cover, etc. And a lot of that's gone away now with the advent of smartphones and telephone interconnects to alert the municipality of a problem. There's computer programs now that can generate one message that's sent out to all of the residents via their iPhones or home phones, and really negates the need for any of the sirens to be used in an effort to take cover or for civil defense attack. It's just a thing of the past now. But for the fire departments, as I said, it's still in primarily volunteer departments. They're utilized, I know, a great deal in Pennsylvania and in New York State and in parts of New Jersey where there's bad phone coverage or just as a backup. And in the advent of insurance ratings, the Insurance Services Office, which establishes insurance rates for every individual city and town, and it actually it's what your fire insurance ratings are based on, and what you're going to pay on a premium is all determined by what the class of your community is. And in some of these places where the sirens are utilized for alerting volunteers, it's considered a secondary circuit above and beyond the pagers and the iPhones. So that in the event, as I said before, the paging system goes down, you still have an ability where somebody's going to hear the whistle and know that there's an alarm and to head to the station. But these are primarily utilized in all volunteer departments.
Wonderful. That's very interesting. And the other sirens that you've restored, were they all the Federal Signal manufacturer?
Yeah, it was basically Federal Signal was the most popular from about 1950 onward, and they'd made things back in the 40s and during World War II, but they really came to be the premier manufacturer of these whistles in the 1950s. They were all over the country, and you'll still see them abandoned on poles and in places that just let them go. After the 1990s is pretty much when they started to fall off the radar screen, and when nobody was maintaining them or utilizing them anymore, as with the advent of the smartphones. But in major metropolitan cities, and a lot of people that grew up during the Cold War can tell you this, that those metropolitan cities had sirens all over the place. And at 12 noon every Wednesday, those sirens activated for about 30 seconds just to test to make sure that they were working. And a lot of them were located at schools or at fire stations or police headquarters, municipal buildings, any place of public gatherings. Many of the towns tried to spread them evenly so that they would be heard in the event of an attack. And as the 1960s came to a close, they really started to fall off the radar in terms of maintenance. And then by 1990, people pretty much really didn't do anything with them. Also, the part of the reason why they're not utilized anymore is that a lot of the circuitry to start and stop them came over the telephone lines. And a lot of the old copper wires are not being maintained by Verizon anymore. And it was a certain special circuit that had to come out of the telephone central office in order to activate them the right way for alert, attack, take cover, or a fire call. And once those telephone lines were disconnected, it was really rather difficult to get these to activate. So some of them have been converted over to radio wave activation, utilizing a control box and a receiver at the site, and then they activate, and that's the way that they're tapped out now. But Federal Signal, for the most part, still makes one or two models of these units that are still sold for tornado warning out in the Midwest and so forth. But the four models that they used, including the one that I did for Jamesburg, are really not utilized anymore. There's only one of the four that's still being manufactured the same way. But the parts were still available, and for a long time I was able to get pieces to get these things rebuilt and restored, but even that's starting to dwindle now because the technology is old technology. But in the case of the Jamesburg borough, the fire siren's always been a fabric of the town. The town had people that worked there and were on the volunteer fire department that worked in the hardware stores and the restaurants and so forth in the town. And when there was a fire call, you knew it because the alarm was going. And as the mayor told me after we put it back up, it's been part of the town's fabric since the 1930s. And she says it's good that we have this back up again.
Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you for your service and the, time and resources that you're donating to these fire departments like Jamesburg. I think your story helps show others that each person can make a difference in their communities and in other communities, and that it really has an impact on other people's lives. So thank you so much for your service. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Municipid podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the world of government surplus, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.